It's taken me 4.5 years to make this. This is an idea for a modular and highly portable table of terrain from Mordheim. After dozens of sketches and a couple different prototypes, this is what I settled on. I took these shapes and converted them to be a half scale of a full 3-foot board. This is so I could really wrap my head around kind of the spaces I'm working with, and also I have the volumes that I will then convert to be full-scale pieces of terrain. So in addition to being able to fold up into itself for transportation, it's also very modular, and that all of these can move around and you can have a bunch of different setups. So now comes the easy part. All I have to do is make it. So I started by taking some measurements of my half-scale model and doing some sketches of kind of what kind of structure would fit best in the kind of predefined shape that I have. Then I started cutting out the walls from just cheap cardboard. They're all gonna be covered over later anyways, so it doesn't really matter what kind of material I use in this step, so I just went with what's cheap. I went ahead and drew like where I thought I might be putting like wood or windows or doors, things of that nature, so that I could kind of wrap my head around how it's actually gonna look. Then I cut out all the areas for windows to go and doors, all that sort of stuff. These windows are just 3D printed versions of the original Mordheim windows that came with the original set. I found that making windows from scratch is one of those things that the time it takes to do it well isn't worth the end result. So it's a place where I'm really happy to have 3D printing to speed up that process and make it much easier and look nice. For most of the wood I use on these builds, I like to break down these larger balsa wood dowels. They're super soft, so they're easy to cut with just a hobby knife. I find that breaking them down adds just a whole lot of variability and texture, and things aren't like perfectly straight, and it is a thing that takes a little bit more time than just using popsicle sticks or coffee stir sticks, which are great options, but I think that the time is worth it. And this balsa wood is super soft, so it's really easy to add texture to with just a wire brush. It doesn't take very long at all, and I do it in batches, and then I just have a box of it that I pull from and kind of just refill whenever I'm running low. Now I'm just huckling the wood onto the walls. I found it's much easier to do all this kind of stuff before it's like a 3D structure. It's nice having everything separate. It's easy to access all the points, and there are little corners and things that are harder to get into if you've actually constructed as 3D. And here I'm just sticking in pieces of wood to the edge of these kind of like ruined walls. It makes a really nice effect that really shows in the next step, where you have a wooden substructure poking through the kind of like plaster style walls that are broken down. It's one of those things that doesn't take very long at all, but I love the like character and texture that it adds to the buildings. I did 2 of the walls backwards, or upside down, either way. So I've got to redo them, which, not a big deal. I'll use these as rubble or on a different thing later, but that's part of really fast iteration and not planning, is that sometimes you do stuff wrong, but that's fine. Now this is the step where you're adding like the daub to the wattle and daub. You can do this with a lot of different materials. You can do it with like spackle wall filler or plaster, things like that. I found that I really like this air dry clay. The brand is DOS, but there's other brands. It's really easy to work with. It's pretty inexpensive. I add a layer of PVA glue to help make sure everything sticks. And I think it probably also helps kind of create cracks because things dry at different speeds. I'm not 100% positive that's the case, but it feels like that would be true. And any kind of additional texture, any kind of like cracking, any kind of like natural decay, I think really adds to the final product. I'm obviously not trying to make any of this look perfect, and in fact, it's quite the opposite. I'm trying to make things look as imperfect as possible without, making it look like a mistake. You gotta kind of trust the process, and things can look bad at this stage and look good later. So I just go in and I accentuate the cracks I already made. I'll create some, new cracks, everything just to make this feel weathered and ruined and lived in and everything. I'm trying to just kind of think about where naturally cracks would happen, the corners of windows, the edges of doors, things like that. All of these things are things that make the painting step much easier, because if you've got all of the texture and character already kind of like built in, you don't have to do any of that with paint. So all of this stuff really just gets brought out in the painting and the dry brushing and the washes later. Now I'm making the floor. This is just a piece of cardstock that I'm putting PVA glue on and then adding floor planks to. I go for lots of different textures. You know, I don't worry at all about them being all perfectly flat. The more character I can add at this step, the better. I want it to look really ramshackle and thrown together. And then I'm just adding, this is aquarium sand, so it's just kind of like larger grit sand between all of the boards, just so there's some texture there in the final product and it's not totally flat. So here, that little extra edge of cardstock I left is where I'm gonna glue the walls on. So I'm just checking to make sure everything fits and it looks good. Okay, so now on to the bricks that are gonna be on the foundation of the level. One of my favorite kind of tricks or materials to use for these brick substructures is different sorts of packing material. Styrofoam, because it's already structural and that's its function, but also you get interesting forms, you get interesting shapes that I wouldn't naturally create. I think it's an easy way to add a lot of character without adding any work. So I'm gonna dig through my stash and see what I've got. Let's see if there's something in here that works. I really like this part of the process. It's very like, you get to discover the shapes instead of have to like figure them out yourself. And I often find that what I discover is more interesting than what I would have built. I use a hot wire cutter to cut the foam just because it's faster and easier, and I have one. You can totally do this with just a hobby knife. So I'm just making a simple shape for the base, and I'm figuring out kind of where it's gonna be ruined and all that kind of stuff. And then I hand lay bricks, which is another process that takes longer than a lot of the alternatives, but I haven't found any other techniques that I think look quite as good. There's a lot of them that are faster and easier that wind up looking good, but I found that I really enjoy the process of laying the bricks. It's a thing that I didn't do for a long time because I just assumed like, well, that's way too tedious, and it's a thing that takes 10 times longer than an alternative that looks pretty good. But once I actually started doing it, I found that I really like the process. It's very kind of meditative. It's a thing that you can kind of put on a podcast or a TV show and zone out. And I just don't think the look can really be beat. I always start out by laying the first layer with hot glue just so that it quickly dries, so that you have like a structure that's gonna be solid to build off of. And then I use tacky glue, which is just a PVA glue, but it's a lot thicker. And it works way better than just like Elmer's glue because the bricks really stick to it, so they don't shift around quite as much. So now I'm actually building the structure. I hot glued the floor on, and now I'm just hot gluing the walls to the floor and in the corners to each other. This is a really fun part of the process because obviously the build is like actually taking shape now, and you can get a really good idea for what the final thing is actually gonna look like. I'm laying a simple brick pattern here just for like the porch of the area, just for a little bit of added detail and interest. Now I'm building the roof structure. So these are like much stronger wooden dowels than the balsa wood because it's actually going to have a structural function, not just look like it has a structural function. So I'm just cutting the pieces of wood to size and then cutting out a little area of the balsa wood where it's gonna go through. This will be the structure that the second story of the structure is actually attached to, so it's important that it's strong. Then I add some structure to the front of it because the second story is gonna overhang the first story, so these will be kind of what holds it up. I use a piece of cardstock just to kind of like get an idea of what I want the second floor to look like and kind of the ruins, and make sure that hands can fit in so that you can move characters around on the interior of the building. The second story is going to be entirely constructed of wood. So I'm, constructing it of wood. I'm adding the windows in and lots of little details, but it's going to be totally ruined, very, very destroyed. This is the flooring. So the bottom section is those like harder wood dowels because it's actual structure. And then the top is all just the balsa wood stripped up. And then it just sits right on top of the rafters from the first floor. This is some Sculptamold that I'm using to add a texture to like this part where it looks ruined and crumbled. Adding in some bricks and just various debris. This is that aquarium sand to make it kind of a rocky texture. And this is one of those things that I just always want to add as much texture as I can at kind of like every possible step along the way. I tried to think about gameplay, so I made it so that the base of a mini can fit on the kind of like edge of that ruin, and it's flat enough where you can put a mini there without it falling over. Now on to painting. I prime everything with Mod Podge that has black paint in it. So the Mod Podge helps strengthen and seal everything. So adding a little bit of strength to everything is good, but it's also important to seal all the exposed XPS foam and styrofoam because I use aerosol spray cans to prime it in the next step. And if you don't, it'll melt your foam. This is just another chance to add texture. I'm adding that aquarium sand. This is tile grout, which I just sprinkle on as the glue dries. It adds cracks and crackles that I just absolutely love. And then this is just a mix of a bunch of garbage that I don't even remember what's in it. I just constantly add things to it and refill it with random stuff as it gets empty. It's watered down glue with black paint and then just dirt and coffee grounds and little bits of debris and things that I just dab onto different sections to add texture. I prime everything in a rattle can kind of muted green. That's because that's the base color that I do my wood, where I don't paint any of the wood, I just use an oil wash on it. So then I just paint over this kind of like sickly green on the daub sections with sort of a flesh tone. These are just super cheap craft paints that you get at any hobby store. Painting is a thing that I definitely am not worried about being perfect or clean on. This stage in the game, nothing has to look good. You just really have to trust the process and know that like the dry brush step and then especially the wash step, like everything comes out in the wash, which I didn't mean, is that what that phrase, that's not what that phrase actually means, right? But everything does come out in the wash, so just trust that. Here you can see that the like crackle texture that the grout really adds that I absolutely love. And it's just such a cheat code when it comes to painting once it's dry brushed and washed. So I keep everything really, really simple, the least amount of colors possible, both for speed and efficiency, but also I want my terrain to function as like a backdrop for minis that or maybe have brighter colors or are more vibrant. I go in with the gray for all the stonework and the bricks. Again, this isn't a thing that you need perfect coverage or you need to worry about getting in all the cracks and crevices. So that's all the like regular painting I do. I go over everything with off-white dry brush. All of the wood and everything is the same color. I don't worry about multiple dry brush colors. This is just to further bring out that texture, to get the edges of things so it looks like light is playing on the edges. And then I wash everything with oil washes. They're really easy. You use mineral spirits and oil wash. They're super, super forgiving. You can just wipe off anything you don't like, and the bang for your buck is crazy, like how much they do with how little effort. I go over all the walls and wood in a light brown wash, and then I add some black into that brown, just using the same cup, and I go over all the stonework with the black. You don't need to worry about if you get it somewhere you don't want or it's too dark or anything. This is super easy to pull off later, so you just want to get full coverage. I decided the brown wasn't deep enough, so I went over all the wood in another layer of a little bit of a thicker brown wash. Again, there's not being careful with any of this. I don't care if it gets on the walls. I'm not trying to be perfect. It's all just texture later. And then I use it on some of the stonework just as like muddy and dirty patches, and it all blends in because everything's still wet. One thing with oil washes is you do have to wait quite a while for them to dry. Obviously, it could be sped up with a hairdryer, which is shocking. What you are looking at right now. Then once it's dry, I go in and wipe it off, kind of like all the surfaces I want to be a little bit lighter, all the texture I want to bring out, all the edges of things. And this is just a little bit of like mineral spirits on makeup sponges. And you just kind of keep working at it this way until it looks pretty much how you want it to look. Then I go in after I finish painting everything and add a like mortar to the brickwork. And this is just plaster. You can do it with wall filler or grout or anything like that. They all wind up looking pretty similar. So you just brush it into the cracks and then you spray it with water and it's plaster, so it hardens. And now the final step is I add an oil wash over the mortar of the bricks just because it winds up a little bit too bright. And so this is just like a yellow wash that I thin down quite a bit. While that yellow wash is still wet, I add some green into it. And this is gonna be kind of like wind up looking mossy and scummy. This is one of my favorite steps because it really makes everything kind of like look alive and come together and just looks so grimy. I'm going around the edges of the planks, the kind of rotting planks, to kind of like add a very like rotten and wet feel to everything. And with that, it's done. I'll get to the beauty shots in just a second, but before I do, I wanted to thank you so much for watching this far into the video. I hope that you learned something or it was inspiring to you and you're gonna go out and make something, because making stuff's great. This is the first in a series of I don't know how many videos where I'm gonna be building an entire table for Mordheim one piece at a time. So if that sounds interesting to you, subscribing to the channel is a great way to keep up with that, or checking out my Patreon below is another great way to do that. As always, liking and commenting helps the algorithm know that you enjoyed this and it might give it to some other people who enjoyed it, which would be awesome. And with all that being said, let's get into the beauty shots.